We're gonna get started today. My name is Grace Bay. I am CEO of Patton Logistics, and I'm gonna be spending some time with you guys today on the webinar. I've got Jesse Smith here with me, our Director of Operations, and we're gonna spend some time digging into some content, some operational content today that we're really excited about. Most of you have probably been with us in webinars before, so you know how these go and the schedule of the day. But just for any new people who might be here, we're going to go over some housekeeping items real quick. I'm going to talk to you guys about some new listings that have just come online. And then Jesse's going to spend some time digging into content, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A where you guys can ask any question. It does not have to be related to the content we go over today. But feel free to throw anything at us, try to stump us. I don't know that we've been stumped yet on a webinar, Jesse, so gold medal to anybody who's able to stump us. But we do have a tradition here that before you can ask a question, you have to answer one of our questions. So we do this as just a fun way to learn a little bit about you guys and have some fun as we're asking questions. Have a little buy-in to the back and forth here. And so I'm going to go ahead and tell you that the question of the day today is, if you could add any person's face to Mount Rushmore, who would you add? So Jesse and I will go first before we dive into Q&A, but I just wanted to give you guys that one. It's a really specific one, and I bet if we think about it, we'll have some really good answers. So be thinking about that. As we dive in, load your questions into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And you can do that as we're going through content, just to make sure that we've got your questions prioritized here when it's time for Q&A. And when you type your answer in, just make sure to answer your selection for our question of the day of who would you add to Mount Rushmore, if you could add anyone, and then list your question for us, and we will read those out and answer them. Okay, so first, let's do some housekeeping on listings. We're going to do P&D first, and then we'll go to line haul. So we have got an operation in Southeast Louisiana. It's 6 P&D routes listed at 400,000, 68% of revenue. It's got 1 manager, 1 spare truck, and 2 spare drivers available for contingency or extra work. And the CSA consists of extremely dense urban territory. So this is a really good one to look at if you guys are looking for an urban CSA. We've got another one in Southeast Louisiana. It's a carve 1 of 2. It's 4 P&D routes listed at 350,000. Excellent starter operation for a contractor new to the FedEx space. So if you want to start with something a little bit smaller, this might be a good one to just bite off a small piece and digest that before you start to grow aggressively. It's got a great roster of efficient drivers, and it's a relatively low entry price into the FedEx Ground network. So again, just a really, really great starter operation. The CSA consists of suburban territory. All stops are located within 1 zip code, which is awesome operationally to just have 1 zip code to have to worry about. So that'll be a really, really straightforward one. And then 3 of the trucks are 2017 and newer. So it sounds like it's got a pretty good fleet. And then the second carve here in Southeast Louisiana is 10 P&D routes listed at 750,000. And it comes with 3 managers, so not at a loss of good management there. 2 spare trucks, great roster of efficient drivers again. The CSA consists of dense urban territory, and it has a 2017 and newer fleet for the majority of the trucks listed there. And then we've got 1 new listing to talk about in the line haul space. So this is in Northeast Virginia. It's 2 line haul runs listed at 840,000. It's 21% EBITDA, 2 dedicated solo runs, 3 spare tractors. 2 of the tractors are under long-term lease agreements, which is always awesome. We've got 4 spare drivers available for contingency or extra work, which in the line haul space is really amazing. And then dedicated runs offer guaranteed revenue. So you're not dealing with unassigns here that you're going to have to worry about. Are we going to get a run this week? Are we not going to get a run? What is the mileage going to be? What's the pay going to be? Dedicated will have that steady stream of predictable revenue. And it's much easier to recruit for drivers in the dedicated space as well. So all good. Okay. So I will hand it over to you, Mr. Jesse, and let you dive into our content for today.
Hello, everyone. So today we, as we always do, we have a little something for potential investors interested in the space, and we have a little something for existing contractors. So bear with me if you hear something that you've already heard before. We're going to just try to get through and get something in here for everybody. So today we are talking about what to expect at a terminal and sort of what to expect for a morning sort. So how do packages make it from point A to point B, getting on your vans in the terminal, who loads them, who's in charge of what. So we're just going to kind of run down this top to bottom. First, we're going to start with what it's like at an actual terminal. So the main thing is here, you just need to remember every terminal is unique. Every terminal is different. There's literally no two the same. There's very, very small terminals that only run about 15 to 20 trucks out of them. And there are ones that run hundreds of trucks every single day out of them. And this is talking about on the P&D side. Some of them are co-locations, what we call, well, it used to be a home delivery residential location with the ground location, but there's also terminals that are grouped together with hubs, right? So those are massive, just gigantic complexes covering acres of space. So really, it's just kind of runs the gamut of what you can expect in terms of size and culture and what you can see when you're there, right? So along with that, there's actually a lot, and this may be surprising to some people, there's a lot of variation when it comes to the security, like when you get there. So, I mean, there's some places where literally all you have to do is scan in your ID badge and you can walk through the turnstile, drive your branded truck through to get into the yard. That's pretty typical. Almost every terminal will have that. But beyond that, you can go through places that they'll wand you down every time you go in and out of the place, right? So that's going to be like your big urban hubs, right? Like Chicago, New York, that's what you're going to expect there. But your places like, take a Dayton, Ohio, right? You walk in, there's a lot of times there's no one there. There may be like a place to walk through like a metal detector. Other than that, there's not a whole lot there, right? You're just kind of, you come in, you go straight to your truck and you moved on about your day, right?
Jesse, I want to
yes.
interject a funny story here, just because you mentioned Dayton, Ohio. And when we first started operating in Dayton, Ohio, I remember the first time I walked into that building, there was I'm pretty sure it was a person who was part-time janitor, part-time security. And she came in, or I walked in and she looked at me and she said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a contractor. I'm here to check on my trucks and my drivers." And she goes, "What's a contractor?" So that is a great example of the extremes that you'll see. You're either wanded down, put through a metal detector. You got to take everything out of your bag, everything out of your, wait, I also have to interject that our CFO Leland loves to bring his 10 key with him everywhere, and went through security in one of the massive security facilities. They took his 10 key out and they said, "What is this? And why are you bringing it in here?" So both sides of the extreme exist.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's a great point about the different kind of personnel that work in there too. I mean, we had one guy down in Etheridge, Tennessee, where I worked one time, and he was part he wasn't really a sort manager. He just kind of walked around and made sure everything was running smoothly. And he also washed the trucks, right? But he was a FedEx employee. So, I mean, they kind of some of them just do it all, So but in terms of like that secure area, I have seen a little bit of this over the years. They definitely are tightening that up. In most places. So usually you can only take branded vehicles in the terminals and on the yard, right? You cannot have personal vehicles in there in the vast majority of cases. If you have an emergency situation where you've got to bring in like a spare piece of equipment that's too big to just lug through security or whatever, and it's in your personal van or something, they will let you do stuff like that. But in general, you can't bring your own cars into the building or onto the yard. Docks. So if you're kind of wondering, if you want to get a picture in your mind of what these places look like. So usually there are powered belts. So moving belts that are staffed with package handlers. There's usually, it can vary. I mean, there can be 25, 30 belts. There can be three to five, right? So trucks will back into these belts, and it's usually on a raised platform so that the package handlers can easily step inside the vehicle with a package and put it on the shelf that it's assigned to go to, right? There's also an area at each terminal for the management of the terminal. So your senior manager, your assistant managers, dock managers, things like that. They will have their own offices there on site. One thing you want to remember too here is that the warehouse area where the belts are, these are not climate controlled environments, right? This is not like, well, I don't actually know any places that would have a warehouse area like that is climate controlled, but these are very, they can get very, very hot and very, very cold, right? So don't expect to be comfortable when you're walking into one of these places. These are literally for getting cardboard in and out as quickly as possible. So, but again, the office areas, those are climate controlled. It's a comfortable place for the people to stay. Is there anything else you want to add as far as what the premises look like, Grace, before I move on to the next thing?
I just wanted to clarify that the office space at the terminal is for FedEx employee and management. So the employees of the FedEx Ground facility that you're operating in, not your employees. So your employees will not have any office space or any place to really call their own to sit down and work throughout the day. It's just there for you and your employees to do the sort and then get out of there.
Yep, good call. Okay, so I want to talk real briefly about the chain of command in each terminal and kind of what you can expect from the people that you're going to see there, the faces you're going to meet. So at the top of every terminal, you've got the senior manager. And there's a lot of times this is abbreviated SRM for senior manager. In your bigger buildings, you're going to have one, maybe two assistant senior managers. These are buildings where there's at least 100+ routes. You may see like an assistant to the senior manager. And then you're going to have below, and we're going to branch off here. Just kind of imagine a tree that branches off here. Okay. So on one side, you got your sort personnel, right? So you've got your lead sort manager. Okay. And then under him, you've probably got some coordinators that kind of bounce between belts and stuff like that. Below them, you have actual belt managers that have specific sections of a belt that they will manage and run and be in charge of the package handlers. And then at the bottom of the food chain, you've got the actual package handlers. Okay, so those are the people pulling the packages off the trailers. They're splitting them to get them down the correct belts to go to the right chutes, to get to the right truck. And then they are the last people that will touch the box before it gets put on your vehicle to go out and be delivered. Okay, and every person I mentioned there, these are all FedEx Ground employees. Okay. And then on the operations side, so the people who are going to oversee what your drivers go out and do each day, these are the people that are going to monitor that kind of progress. That's your operations side. So at the top of that, just under the senior manager is going to be the P&D manager. All right. There's actually some places I've been to, and Grace can attest to this. Sometimes your P&D manager is really kind of your default senior manager. Like he or she really kind of runs the show. Because they just oversee so many different pieces of the puzzle. So they've got their hands in the sort, they know what's going on there. They've got their hands in getting the boxes out the door, knowing, what driver needs to go to which area, what managers to talk to, what business contacts for which contractor to talk to. They kind of put all the pieces together. That's what your P&D manager does. And then under him, you have a couple other branches. You've got operations managers, which are sort of just like mini P&D managers that run around, hand out paperwork and things like that. They'll oversee disputes and complaints if your driver, misdelivers a package or drives into someone's yard. These are the people that will talk to you about those kind of things. And then at the bottom of that chain, you've got the operations coordinator. So they are literally just kind of the peons that run around and do whatever the operations managers and P&D managers doesn't want to do. Okay, so they are talking to people, but they're mostly handing out paperwork to contractors and VCs. They are saying, hey, I need to get this box and pull it off because the customer requested an address change, things like that. Also in there, I'm not really sure where this person falls in the mix, but you've got your quality assurance people, your QA people. It's probably on the sort side, but they're going to make sure the addresses are correct. If a box is busted open, this is the person you talk to, right? So that's kind of what your chain of command. Those are your people that you're going to see in a terminal on a typical day. A lot of times you won't see your senior manager out walking around. Sometimes you will, but a lot of times your senior manager and sometimes your P&D manager, you got to go find them if you want to talk to them. Okay. So let's Grace, unless there's anything else you want to add there. I was going to move into what a sort looks like.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So basically we'll walk through this real quick. It's going to start early in the morning, right? So the trailers are going to start arriving from the hubs that they left, usually around 1, 2, 3 a.m., right? It'll be in early hours of the morning. So your package handlers and your belt managers will be there at that time to oversee the boxes that are starting to come into the station and getting diverted to various belts and onto the trucks, okay? So the final destination for the packages in the terminal is what's called, in the business, we call it a work area, okay? That can mean a few different things, but for purposes of this, it's both the parking spot where the truck is that the boxes go, and it's the load plan for that truck. It can mean either one of those things. So let me kind of flesh that out a little bit. So the load plan is the order you have set up your route to run. So it's the way, it's basically the directions that your driver is going to take in order to get from the first stop to the last stop. And theoretically, FedEx's software, their sortation software, has it to where ideally your first stop is going to be just inside your bulkhead door when you enter the cargo area from the cab. Your first stop should be right there on the shelf next to you. Okay, that's the way it's supposed to be set up. Okay, that's the way the load plans are set up. If package handlers put stuff in the wrong place, and yes, that happens a lot. I know we're going to get some amens from our current contractors on that, but the package handlers put these on the shelf based on a number that's on the package on a little sticker, and that's called a shelf assignment, a shelf ID. So we call it a SID number for short, an SID. So that is slapped on the box when it leaves the trailer to enter the station. It is given a label and it's sent down to the correct belt. Package handler pulls it off the belt for the 3 or 4 trucks that he or she oversees, and will put it on the correct shelf that corresponds to the number that's on that sticker. So there's a lot more that can be said there for that, but that's kind of just the simplified version. The little SID stickers, that's how the package handlers know what truck and what shelf to put each package on. And that, again, that corresponds to the way that the route is supposed to run that day, okay? So basically, when a trailer arrives, the package receives an inbound scan, it gets the SID label, and it's sent down to this parking spot where it goes. If it's an oversized package, it will be put on what's called a tugger cart. It's usually a little EV cart that just takes the packages to the various work areas where they're supposed to go. That's because FedEx Ground handles a lot of oversized cargo, what are called ICs, incompatible cargo. If a package is too heavy or too long to fit on a belt, where it will cause like a jam, or it'll cause the belt to shut down because there's too much weight on it, that package will go on a cart that is taken around the belt system and through the parking area, around to where, or the driveway area inside the building, to where that truck is, to where the box needs to go. Let's say that a truck has too many packages on it and the package handler runs out of room to put more boxes in. Typically there are little, what we call porches, along the side of some of the trucks, and the nearest porch, these are little kind of like islands that run off the edge of the dock. The package handlers will put the excess boxes there, or they will bring over a cart, a movable cart, and load them in the cart so that you can pull your truck forward when the sort is finished, pull that cart in behind it, and just hand load the boxes into the truck from there. And one really important thing here is FedEx employees, they are not supposed to load down the middle aisle of your trucks. Okay, that's supposed to be a kind of a DOT thing, where they're not supposed to leave that area cluttered. They're supposed to leave that clear. Now, they will leave that up to you to do. If you want to put something there, they will leave the oversized boxes and the bulk stops. They will oftentimes leave those outside of the truck for you or your driver to put in at the end of the sort. Okay, so there are going to be some things where your driver needs to get there earlier than when the sort ends, so that they can go through their truck, load boxes that were left outside, and make sure everything is in good order. So if you got drivers that are showing up right at the dispatch, what we call the dispatch time, though, that can potentially be a problem. So you really want your drivers to come in earlier and get a good look at their truck first. Last thing I'll say about this, obviously with them getting there before the sort ends, they are going to be interacting with package handlers. And we've seen more than once that can be a very potentially volatile time. And so you want to make sure that you ingrain in your drivers, like, hey, if a package handler puts a box on a shelf where it's not supposed to go, the driver sees it. There sometimes can be an altercation. Make sure that you tell your drivers very clearly, hey, if there is any issue small or large, outside of just like, hey, how you doing? They do not need to be spending a lot of time talking to the package handlers, okay? Because that situations can escalate very quickly. We've seen more than one driver get disqualified or get suspended for even minor little things that they've said to package handlers, okay? So that's something that FedEx takes very seriously. Make sure your drivers escalate any issues they have to the next chain of command in your company. They do not need to go to anyone at FedEx. They need to go to your manager, your business contact, and say, hey, such and such happened, and let your manager take it from there. Yeah, so that's basically that's a morning sort in a nutshell. When you walk in, it's going to look like chaos. It's going to be crazy. There's going to be trucks coming in and out. There's going to be little tuggers going everywhere. But that's a morning sort in a nutshell. And Grace, if you want to add anything to that, that's basically all I've got on this.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. Just knowing what to expect is a really important piece of this puzzle, because a lot of times, we think we know in our minds what to expect when we think about a terminal and sort and boxes and stuff, and it's really difficult to visualize if you haven't ever seen it before. So those are some really good details to help kind of inform that. And from a recruiting side too, when you're recruiting drivers, it is so important that they understand what this morning sort looks like and what the terminal looks like, and kind of how they're going to engage with that environment, because a lot of people coming into your operation, especially on the P&D side, well, really only on the P&D side, won't ever have any experience in this type of environment. They may have never worked in a terminal or driven a truck. A lot of the standards that are changing inside of the FedEx network for P&D driver requirements are going to result in your ability to hire people who've never been a delivery driver. They've worked at Starbucks for 5 years, or Target, or Walmart, or wherever you're hiring from, whatever experience they have, and then they walk into what looks like some mornings Armageddon, and they are like, what the heck? This is not organized. I don't have my AC and my little space where I go and I can just be by myself at my desk. Like, that is not at all what this environment is like. And so knowing that on the front end, and then experiencing it, and then also being able to relay that to your candidates coming through, will help set the expectation before they walk into something that they're surprised by, that results in attrition, right? And so those expectations are really, really important. And I think that Jesse hit on one of the things that results in probably some of the most driver turnover that we have is issues with the quality of the sort. A lot of times drivers will get to a point of frustration with package handlers putting things in the wrong spot on a truck, where they just kind of throw their hands up and they say, how can I be expected to do my job well? And how can I be efficient? And how can I ever end my day at a reasonable time if the sort is so poorly done? That's not every facility that you're going to have problems that result in high driver turnover in every facility, but there are going to be issues. And so that's something to get their expectation set on the front end of saying, your truck will not always be organized perfectly. And what I try to coach our drivers to do is change our mindset around this particular piece. It's something that we can predict. We know the sort will never be 100% accurate. And so I could have a victim mentality to say, these package handlers are doing this to me, and it is resulting in my inability to finish my day at a reasonable hour. And it's resulting in me having to stop and waste time at my stops that I'm going to, and trying to find packages and rummaging through my truck, trying to find a box that's not in the right spot. Or you can change your mindset to say, let's take advantage of the fact that we know this predictable outcome is going to happen every morning. The sort is going to have some problematic element to it, right? And so if we come in an hour before dispatch time, so an hour before the sort is done and the trucks can start rolling out, that could potentially save hours of work on route trying to find boxes that are in the wrong spot. So drivers come in a little bit early, they organize their trucks, they get everything in the right spot, and then that way they're not digging through their truck all day trying to find stops if a load quality was poor. So that's something to think about if you're an incoming contractor, just to be on the front end of that. But if you're an existing contractor and you've got drivers that are frustrated with sort, that's a way you can kind of change their mindset to say, let's use this predictable outcome to try to rework the way that we engage with something we know is going to happen, right? And get ahead of it and be solution oriented rather than a victim mindset.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, and I was going to add to real quick, Grace, is that to me, that's one of the biggest asymmetries that I see in the network that has existed for a while, which is you have some of the least motivated, least well compensated people on the FedEx ground side. They are at the bottom of the food chain, these package handlers, right? So they have the least amount of motivation to do their jobs well and to put the packages on the correct shelf. Whereas on our side, time is quite literally money, right? So efficiency is the name of the game, with margins being so tight right now, especially. So an hour lost due to a poor sortation on your truck, multiplied across your entire fleet, that could be the difference between, life or death for some of these more poorly run facilities, right? So that's why it's just even more crucial, like you said, just to emphasize that, make sure your drivers know that is part of their mindset, part of their job description, to come in early before they dispatch. Their job starts when they enter that truck and they go through it and make sure everything is right.
Yep. I may or may not have talked to a few package handlers offline and offered them a steak dinner if they were consistent in good load quality, because FedEx doesn't offer any incentives for that. So I cannot confirm or deny that has ever happened, but you might be able to use some tactics like that to your advantage. So, okay. So we're going to transition now and open up to Q&A. So load in your questions. Feel free to ask anything that comes to mind. It does not have to be about the facilities or load or anything like that. Feel free to load in whatever you would like. And now, Jesse, I would like to ask you, if you could add anyone's face to Mount Rushmore, who would you add?
Well, I'm going to get out ahead of you and try to get a woman up there. Okay. But no, literally, this is someone that I've always had just a ton of respect for. If you've done any reading on the founding of the country, Abigail Adams, just an absolutely incredibly inspiring person, just working in the background. She doesn't get a lot of time in the limelight, but John Adams, obviously one of the big names, one of the titans of the founding of this country. And she was right there every step of the way, inspiring him. Reading their letters back and forth, like she was every bit as educated and just engaged as he was. You think about like women kind of just being barefoot in the kitchen right back then. And even though that was more of that back then, she was just an example of how just incredible and educated and engaged these women were. So I really love and respect Abigail Adams. And I think it'd be great to have a woman up there. I think she'd be great for that role.
I love that. I love a powerful woman. Okay, so my answer was kind of similar, and I might add some to it so that I'm not totally stealing your thunder here with the female response. I was just going to open it up to potentially some wonderful first ladies, because I feel like, we talk about this all the time, just at our company from this level, but certainly as President of the United States, your spouse is a large part of making or breaking your success. And there is some really, really amazing support that's happened in the history of our presidents. And I think from their first ladies, and I think that should be represented. But I also, this might just be like my inner true, like softie showing, which most people don't get to see a lot, but I'll put it out there for you guys. I feel like we just need like a little heart or something on there to just remind people that we need to have some like love and unity sometimes, and just maybe just a little reminder. I think we could use some more love and understanding in our country these days, between both aisles. So that's all I'll say about that. I won't go into any more politics. So, okay, everybody load your questions. Make sure to tell us who you would add onto Mount Rushmore if you have the opportunity. And I will kick us off with our first question here. So first, Matt O'Brien said that he would love to add President Trump to Mount Rushmore. And then his question is, I've heard that FedEx P&D routes historically have a profit margin of 15 to 25%. With inflation and labor issues that we are expecting or experiencing now, what margins should a new P&D owner expect to see? In our current recessionary climate, how much of a volume decrease are you expecting? Great question, Matthew. This is something that is really going to depend upon a lot of factors. So first, where are you located in the country? We're seeing different volume decreases or sometimes increases really happen regionally or in certain more urban areas or more rural areas. So that will be one factor that we need to consider there. And some other factors to consider are how well are the operators that you're buying from squeezing efficiencies out of their operations. So you might be looking at a business that has a lot of efficiency to gain, and maybe it's operating potentially at a loss right now, but with a great operator at the helm, you might be able to squeeze out, 5, 10, 15% even. And what we want to remember is that there is a bell curve of profitability in these operations. And we've always seen operations that fall on the extreme end where they're super profitable, operations that fall at the other extreme where they're not profitable or operating at a loss. And then we've got that middle ground, right? And so we're seeing the bell curve shift a little bit, but we still have people who are getting excellent margins depending upon where they're located and how they operate, and some other factors that we can dive into with you and look at specific businesses. And then we have people who are not operating at a profit at all. So I think it's just important to remember that bell curve, and we're going to have people on all ends of the spectrum. But we'd love to dive into a specific operation with you and see, is this healthy? Does this look like this is an operation that has efficiency that could still be squeezed out? Or is it something that looks like it's running as efficiently as possible? And if you're a current contractor and you're interested in, looking at your business and doing an assessment and saying, where could I possibly squeeze more? Happy to dive into that with you guys as well. Okay. All right. So Jesse, I want to ask a question regarding peak, since it's kind of just very coming right now, and it's very prevalent and on the forefront of everybody's mind. So what are some tips and tricks that help contractors and BCs get mentally prepared for peak and help their drivers get prepared? Because I think we're right at that time now at the end of October where most of your hires are kind of starting to trickle through, and you're going to hit a season of training in November, and then come end of November, beginning of December, it's really go, go, go time. So for our current contractors and for our incoming contractors, what are some things that they can be focused on to get ready for that?
Yeah, great question. So I think some of it kind of just happens automatically when you start, as long as you get out ahead of your recruiting, especially, and making sure you're staffing up early. And we typically tell people to start that in late September or early October, start that process, particularly because First Advantage, the vetting company we have to use, that can take quite a bit of time sometimes, especially when it gets backlogged with a lot of candidates trying to come through. So when you start getting people in the door that don't know the space, right? You're bringing in new drivers off the street to help you for this season. I've always found it's really helpful. It keeps me in the mindset when I'm going out with these drivers, training them. So like I said, it kind of just happens organically when you're going out, showing them the ropes, thinking through it from their perspective, from step one all the way through, veteran driver status. You got to walk them through how to use the scanner. You got to teach them how to use the routing software that you've got. I don't know. It really just kind of, I feel like there's not a lot of things when I was a manager, there's not a lot of things I actively did. I just made sure that I was sort of hitting my benchmarks in terms of my timeline. So, getting our trucks rented, getting our drivers hired, getting extra devices rented, scanners, iPads, things like that. It just it happens as you gear up incrementally. So I think just keeping your head in the game is the most important part. Again, you're gonna start as a manager, especially, you're gonna start not only training new drivers, but as that volume builds, you're gonna have to be on a truck yourself. I mean, even if you're the top of the line manager, and even a lot of owners, if they want, there's opportunity for you to get out on a truck and deliver boxes. If you want to sling cardboard, there's plenty of chances for you to make up some ground in November and December. So I think just the volume starting to trickle in and seeing new faces and getting trucks rented, it just happens as you make sure you're staying on your timeline.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point to have a timeline first and foremost.
Yes.
And to make sure that we're hitting those benchmarks. And one thing that I like to do too with our teams is to do a check-in with the drivers, with all of your existing drivers, and ask them before you get into November, that mid-November timeframe. The earlier you can do it, the better, really. But I would say by like mid-November at the latest, ask them, do you have the uniforms that you need to be comfortable during peak season? So do I need to order you a sweatshirt? Do I need to order you a jacket? Do you want a beanie? Those things really go a long way with your tenured drivers, because they're out there long hours and in a lot of parts of the country in inclement weather. And if they're comfortable and warm and, if they have all of those like basic things that they need, and you're giving them an opportunity to kind of like refresh that part of their uniform, they're going to feel really taken care of, and they're going to do their job better versus being cold, wearing pants that have holes in them and a sweatshirt that has, rips in it. And, I've seen some uniforms of all different statuses of life. So definitely do a check-in on uniforms, do a check-in on technology too. So make sure, are any scanners damaged and not working properly? Are any iPads damaged or tablets that you use? Cracked screens, just those kind of things that they might not think about letting you know are affecting their ability to deliver efficiently. But doing a check-in, you would be surprised how many drivers actually say, yeah, actually, I do have a cracked screen. It's really difficult for me to operate my ground cloud or my route optimization, whatever I'm using. And I kind of have to do this workaround. It takes a little longer. And you're like, why would you have not thought to tell me about that? So definitely do a check-in on technology. Chargers, that's a huge thing. Drivers somehow always have this uncanny ability to lose chargers and extra batteries. So do a check-in on that. Make sure that they have the chargers that they need so that their scanners aren't dying on route, their tablets aren't dying on route. Those things are just things that we can kind of take for granted that, yeah, nobody's told me that anything's wrong. And then you open the door for feedback and you learn that nobody has any chargers or any spare batteries, and we don't know how anybody's been doing their job. But do a check-in on that for your tenured drivers and for your vet drivers, and they'll be much more efficient during peak season. Okay.
Well said. And the only thing I would add to that is we've talked about this before with peak prep, but your DRO, your dynamic route optimization, make sure that you've taken some necessary steps to get that ready for your peak plans, because the volume is going to just flood in. And you want to make sure that your route plans are set up and optimized to run an extra number of trucks. If you need to run, 10 extra trucks or however many it is, make sure that you've got sort of the DRO infrastructure, and just contact us if you don't know how to do that, or, need some advice on tips and tricks. We got a lot of things we can share with you there, but making sure that's ready so that your BC is not spending 3 hours per night after a full day of delivering and taking all kinds of calls from texts from drivers, right? So that piece, I think, gets forgotten. So make sure you're staying up on that, just to keep his or her workflow flowing smoothly each and every night throughout the grueling month that is peak season.
Yep. Very, very good advice. All right. We have got a question from Daryl. And Daryl first would like to nominate FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to the mountain. And he said that FDR transformed our government from one that privileged the wealthy into one that answered to ordinary Americans. And his question is, and Jesse, I'll give this one to you. Who moves the trucks to the belts, especially when you add trucks during peak?
Yeah, that's again going to vary based on the size of your terminal and how much extra space you have to move things around. So your bigger, newer terminals are oftentimes, they'll usually build out more space than they need. And so a lot of times those buildings are going to have spare parking spots along the docks. And so you as the contractor are responsible for moving your vehicles into the place that they're designated to be loaded at. If your building is out of spots, then a lot of times what will happen is they will just load up entire work areas on these carts that I was mentioning earlier. And they will move, you can move these carts to wherever on the property, inside or outside, that the truck has to be parked in order to be out of the way, clear of ingress, egress, people leaving and coming from the terminal. Literally wherever you can find an open spot. I'm thinking here of Terre Haute, Indiana is notorious for that. You walk through that yard, there is not a single inch of open space to park another truck. So every peak they get kind of maxed out. So it'll either be a matter of your drivers parking at a spot kind of away from the belts and bringing carts of boxes over to it, or they will be responsible for moving the truck to the dock themselves.
Yep, exactly. It is amazing how creative they get with the usage of space in the terminal. Mm-hmm. So definitely prepare your peak drivers for that. Okay. Speaking of peak, we have a question about winter weather. So Jesse, what is the typical way that a terminal handles a situation where an area has snow and ice?
So a senior manager has two main things on his mind. The first one is getting his dock clean. And right up there at the top with that is keeping his safety score up, right? So there's going to be times when his dock is starting to fill up and there's extra trailers that have not been emptied yet that are piling up in the yard, especially with inclement weather, if trucks are not able to run. So it is up to you as the contractor on whether you want to dispatch your drivers. Okay, that is 100% at your discretion. Okay, there are service exemptions we get for valid weather reasons that you can put on your boxes. Whether a driver is already dispatched and has to bring some back because it starts to get icy or whatever, or if you just decide not to run the trucks, you will get service exemptions for those. Now, having said that, I do want to balance that with the senior manager is going to make sure they're keeping you honest about that. And even on days where it looks a little dicey outside, they're going to be like, can you at least get a few of your in-town routes? If you have like country routes and in-town routes, they're going to put pressure on you in a lot of cases to get boxes out the door, understandably so. But at the end of the day, it is your call, completely your call on what you want to do in that situation.
Yep, exactly. And I'll add one thing there, just to say that even in the case where there is a legitimate weather event that is keeping your drivers from going out and safely delivering, and you make the decision to take the service exemption, not deliver the packages, the senior manager's expectation of when those boxes will get delivered will be unrealistic a lot of times. So what I mean by this is if you have, let's say, 1,000 packages that do not get delivered today because we have ice and snow, those 1,000 packages are going to show up tomorrow in your sort, in addition to all of your new volume. And the senior manager will expect that all of that goes out and gets delivered tomorrow if it's safe. And so there is not much of a grace period between when the weather event happened and then when the packages that weren't delivered need to be delivered. It's pretty much they need to be delivered right now. So the longer that you wait to start shipping into the volume that was undeliverable, the harder it's going to be to get caught up. And that's where I see, no pun intended, but the snowball effect happen, where contractors can't get out from underneath the backlog of volume that they were stuck rolling because of a snowstorm or ice storm. So I say this not to say don't use the exemption, because there are very, very valid reasons to use those exemptions, especially when safety is, in question. It's not worth it if you're going to have an accident or if a driver's going to get hurt. But I say this to warn you to not overuse it, because it can be really hard to get out from underneath. But luckily during peak season is when most of this weather happens. You usually have extra drivers at your disposal if you're recruiting, so you can chew into it a lot easier than other times of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, let's see here. Where should we go next? So we have a lot of anonymous questions here who have not answered our questions about Mount Rushmore, but I will give them a pass since they're anonymous and I can't call them out. So someone is asking, is there any way we can get into the terminal to start learning the business before 2023 if the senior manager has pushed our stand-up date to January? This is a great question. And some of this is going to be dependent upon the seller that you're working with. If you are purchasing a business, if you're looking at an open CSA, that might be a little different. We'll talk to you offline about that. But if you're purchasing a business, you can work with the seller to be processed as what we call a helper. And so in this scenario, you would basically fill out an application to be a helper for the business that you're buying. You'd go through the First Advantage approval process. So First Advantage is just a third party that approves all of the FedEx drivers and helpers to basically give the stamp of approval and say, yes, they can drive for FedEx or they can be on a FedEx truck. As a helper, you're not actually getting qualified to drive. You are just getting qualified to physically be on a FedEx yard, on a FedEx truck. And so that requires that you have a background check, which is the most important part. And then once that approval has gone through, you can be at the FedEx facility, you can be on a truck from FedEx's perspective. Now, from your seller's perspective, oftentimes they don't want to do that early because it could potentially spook the drivers. But if you're coming in as just a trainee, a jumper, maybe you come in after the drivers leave or very close to the end of the sort, there's a lot of creative ways that you can talk to the seller about that to potentially get in a little bit early. But as I mentioned, if you're talking about an open CSA, talk to us offline about that one and we can give you some ideas on that. Okay. All right, so let's go to, oh, and actually just to clarify this really quick, this person asked how old do you have to be a helper, and you just have to be over 18. You have to be 21 or over to be a driver, but you only have to be 18 to be a helper, 18 or older. All right. So we have a question about the new MyGround Biz layout. So this person said they would totally put Bono on Mount Rushmore. That one is hilarious. I don't know how the United States feels about putting, he's Irish, right? An Irishman up there.
Yep.
But
I don't think that's allowed, but man, I don't know.
I don't know if that's allowed.
A lot of YouTube fans here.
American. That's not American. Okay. So this question is, if you guys could touch on tips for the new MyGround Biz account layout, that would be super helpful. So this might be one that we dig into more offline, but I just want to say overall, just a note to this overall, everything that existed in your MyGround Biz account before the layout change still exists, and it is usually titled the same thing. And so the major change is where it lives, right? And like what buttons you click to get there. I've been actually surprised at the functionality of the search bar in the new layout and being able to find certain reports easily that way. So if you know the name of what you're looking for or a keyword, try typing that in the search bar. And it's actually been surprisingly helpful in finding what I have yet to locate and navigate on there. Okay. Let's go to, okay. Let's go to a line haul P&D question. So we have another anonymous attendee that is asking, are you guys seeing more people gravitate to line haul versus P&D as it's getting more difficult to predict volume and trends? This is an interesting question, and I don't know that I can speak to the data on that. That would be an interesting question for some route consultant team members to maybe jump in on. But I will say that line haul is a really, really great consideration if you are looking for very consistent volume. Line haul is going dedicated routes. I will say unassigned is much more ebb and flow, but your dedicated line haul runs are going to be the most consistent of any type of operation in the FedEx space. one thing that is important to know about line haul runs before you purchase them or before you take them on is what position they are. So in the FedEx network, FedEx has dedicated runs that go from point A to point B back to point A. And in a lot of cases, a terminal will have a need for multiple of those same runs every single week. And so they have position numbers where it might be position 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 20. And some terminals, they have 20 different contractors and different runs that they need to go from the same point A to point B back to point A every single week. And that position number will tell you how insulated you are from potential cancellations of that run, which would result in unpredictable runs, right? And so if FedEx doesn't cancel them, they're gonna run. And if you're number 1 of 20, you are very insulated. So 20 people or 19 people, 19 runs would be canceled before they cancel your run. If you're 1 of 1, that's also, it can be misleading, right? Because if something is gonna get canceled, you're the only one to get canceled on that particular lane, that particular run. So knowing not only your position number, but also how many positions of that run are within that particular terminal will help you determine how insulated you are from the variability and potential cancellations. Okay. All right. We are going to go to Andy Rod next. So, oh my goodness, I am probably going to say this name wrong, but Hedy Lamarr, she invented a frequency skipping system in World War II to prevent jamming of radio-controlled torpedoes, which is the technology that ultimately enabled the skipping that enables cell phones to work as we go from area to area. We have okay, that's the end. That's the end of his Mount Rushmore comment. So that is super interesting, Andy, and a piece of history that I did not know. So thank you for that. And then Andy is asking, he said, we have very rural routes that have no outlet roads and mile-long driveways. We're creating a process for our team that is consistent. How have you guys handled this in the past?
Well, I would ask Andy for a follow-up there because I'm not entirely sure what he's wanting there. I guess the only thing I would say about that, well, I'll attack it from a couple of perspectives. So first, one thing I want to say about DRO on that, on your very long dead end roads, mile-long driveways, make sure your anchor areas are cut right. I just want to say that. Make sure that there's nothing that's like, make sure a single zone that has some stops in it does not have one part of the dead end road and another anchor has the other end of the dead end road. Because if those anchor areas go to 2 different routes, you're going to have one driver coming all the way out of his way, going to the end of a dead end road, coming all the way back around. So on that, I always want to mention that when people mention rural dead end roads, because that can be a really big efficiency killer. As far as like, if you're looking up the driveway, I guess one thing that I say to my guys is if you can't see the end of it, it's really up to you. I'm not going to penalize someone who, especially with a bigger vehicle, is not going to take a truck to a place they can't see. If there's a lot of like, branches in the way or a lot of curves, or it's way uphill or way downhill, just use your best judgment. I don't think there's any one single rule that's going to cover every single long driveway. But those are just some things to think about. Also, if you have software like GroundCloud or something that allows you to put in stop notes or address notes, make sure you are putting in, hey, there's a turnaround up here at the end of this road. This one does not have a place to turn around. Hey, there's a dog here that is not friendly at this driveway. Just anything that will help a driver who comes to that area for the first time know what to do. So Andy, I hope that answers your question on that. Again, there's not really any hard and fast rules on that, but specific examples I'd be more than happy to help with. But hope that helps for what you need.
Yeah, and Andy did clarify here really quick. So he is talking about our stance on backing, and if we make drivers walk, like if we make instead of driving through the entire driveway and then backing out potentially So that's the clarification there.
Yeah, that's okay. That's a good clarification. So if I can't see the house, I'm generally going to be just fine with the driver entering the driveway. However, I will say if you don't know and you do have to enter the driveway, always back first. Always, no exceptions. You always make sure you got to go in somewhere and you can't see the end. You don't want to have to back out from there. So put it in reverse first if you do have to use reverse. If you can see the house, I'm going to advise you to not go in that driveway at all. If it's within a reasonable walking distance, just, if it's a bigger box, get your hand cart. It's going to take some time, but trust me, if you can get your drivers in the mindset that it's not worth an incident, it's not worth property damage, it's not worth having something that counts against you on your Schedule L. If you can get that into their minds, that's going to be the most important thing. So one of my managers, we didn't have a ton of rural driveways in this particular CSA, but there were some driveways that went between houses for houses that were like built back behind. It was kind of weird. That's some weird subdivisions in this CSA. And without exception, there was not a single exception. Our manager would go around and do audits. And if he found a single truck in a driveway, that driver would get in trouble. They would get written up. They get a verbal warning. Even if it was 100 yards, 200 yards long, you could not get in a driveway or you would get in trouble. So it depends on how stiff arm you want to be about it. But the more you can stay out of a driveway, the better.
Yeah. And I'll add just one additional point there. When you have an accident and it is caused when a driver is backing their truck up versus moving forward, it results in a higher cost to you. I won't get into the weeds just because I know we have some people who aren't existing contractors yet, but it will cost you more money if it is backing related. And so I had a slew of backing accidents happen in our operations at one point, and I literally mandated that if drivers were going to back, they had to send a picture of the scenario that they were in that they thought required them to back their truck up, because 99% of the time you just don't need to do it. And if you do it, back into a driveway so that you can come nose out of a driveway, for sure. So, but as Jesse mentioned, some contractors are super strict on it, some aren't. We'll leave that up to you guys, but that's kind of how our stance was on it. Okay, we've got time for maybe just one more. I'm not sure if this answer about Mount Rushmore applies to this particular anonymous attendee's question or not, because it's been kind of piecemeal, but I like their answer, so I'm going to read it anyways. So someone said that they think they would put Dolly Parton on Mount Rushmore. She's a national treasure, and I would have to agree with you. Or Betty White. Both, I think, have earned their spot. Okay, and then we have a question from anonymous attendee. Do you lean more on FedEx projections for peak season or on the historicals from the previous year to account for the additional resources, trucks and drivers? So I'll give a little piece on this, and then Jesse, I want you to give a piece on this too. So I would say the less you can rely on FedEx projections, the better, up until like a couple weeks before peak. So the closer you get to peak, the more dialed in and accurate FedEx's projections are going to get. Up until that point, definitely look at historicals. And one thing that Jesse and I have done in the past is we've looked at the previous year and we've run a work area planner analysis on that. So for those of you who don't know what work area planner is yet, it's basically just a look back at how you have operated your routes on specific days that you choose and how efficient you were versus how efficient you could be. And Jesse and I have looked at that and said, okay, let's analyze last peak and let's see where did we have excess drivers, excess fat. And if we were to have run last peak all over again this peak, but as efficiently as possible, what would that resource count be? And that's a really great baseline to start with before the projections start getting really accurate. And then if the projections are coming in and they're looking like they're lighter than last peak, you can always back off of that resource count a little bit. But that's just a good baseline to take a look at. So Jesse, you want to add anything to that?
Not a whole lot. I would just say I usually try to split the difference. I'll kind of take a little bit of both. I'll rely probably a little more heavily on the historicals versus what FedEx says. But yeah, like you said, the later you can make the later in the year, the closer it gets to peak, the more accurate it's going to be, right? So I never take their first answer as the gospel truth. I will look at my numbers first and kind of base it on those, and kind of use FedEx's number to temper that. So yeah, I guess that's the short answer.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we are at time, so we are going to shut this down for today. But thank you guys for all of your great questions and for spending this hour with us. We really love to get to engage with you and chat about things that we eat and breathe and have been doing for a while, and answer all the questions that you have. So we will see you same time, same place next week. And we hope you have a good rest of your week.